And we're live. Joe, go.
What new hell has happened this past week, Neil?
A lot.
A lot?
Yeah. We've got three main topics today. Basically, the ICJ ruling on Israel and genocide. Probably also cover the farmers' protests in Europe, which have spread to France and many other places. And thirdly, the Texas border showdown. In no particular order, but there'll be other stuff too, but the main things we'll talk about. So what do you want to start with?
Start with them...
Yeah, you're raring to go this week.
Start with them Jews.
Waiting. Okay. Then what do you mean? You mean the Muslims?
Huh?
The Muslims.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I meant Muslims. Did I say Jews?
Remember what I told you? Insert Muslims whenever.
I just get confused, you know. The two of them. It's hard to pick it out of it. It's very confusing. I mean, in the past 25 years, I've been programmed to think that Muslims are the threat to entire Western civilization, and then recently people have been saying it's the Jews, and I just get very confused. And I think it's everybody, you know.
Oh, it's
And not only the Jews, it's the Muslims, then the Jews, and then white people. What does that leave? Chinese and blacks that are the only good ones. Like, so I don't know. I just throw them all in together, really. You know?
The Inuits. What side are they on?
Well, they're minorities, so they're all right. All the minorities are good. Anyway, yeah.
ICJ ruling. It's genocide, potentially.
No, it was...
Everyone seems to have a subjective take on it. What do you think?
It was Israel... The ICJ is like Israel. The ICJ basically, none of them wanted to say that Israel was guilty of genocide because, well, I mean, what's the definition of genocide? Okay, there's a definition of genocide, but it's still kind of like open to interpretation given the situation, you know, given the case, you know, because like genocide is against a group of people, right? Is there an exact percentage of those people that you would have to kill before it's you know, and then it's genocide? So I don't think anybody has defined it that specifically. So the ICJ was like, well, we're not exactly going to say that Israel has committed genocide because it has only killed 1% of the Gaza population, right? So 1%, apparently that's not enough to... And then there's, you know, well, we weren't really deliberately killing them. It was kind of collateral damage, etc., etc. And the next question is, well, so Israel hasn't committed genocide. Is it committing genocide? Well, that's even more problematic. How can you tell? I mean, that's like you need a crystal ball to see into the future if someone is in the process of committing genocide. So they were faced with a situation where they were just going to have to say, listen, Israel, just stop, you know, protect civilians, you know, be nice, be human, be civil. You know, you're meant to be a Western aligned or Western like or even Western democracy. In Western democracies, we don't just slaughter people that we don't like or that annoy us or that we want to get rid of. We don't do that. So it looks like you might be doing that. At least a lot of people are saying that that's what it looks like you're doing, and you don't want to continue doing that. So please try to just rein it in a little bit. Don't give us any reason. Don't just. It's like Israel. We don't want to see you back here. When you go to the headmaster. Headmaster says, listen, you've been doing this, and this. That has to stop. That behavior has to stop. Now get out of here, and I don't want to see you back in this room. That's what the ICJ told Israel. And Israel went, thanks very much.
Well, yeah, their blink reaction was antisemitism and this tweet from a government minister. I think it translates to Haig Schmeig. I'll look for it in a second.
Schmeig.
Yeah, he Minister for Economy or something. He just tweeted Haig Schmeig that night. Okay, but before Israel has officially responded and unofficially, but okay, so it's genocide but they will be back, won't they? My understanding is this is an initial ruling to assert whether the case South Africa brought has merit, check, and
They won't be back in the sense of like a whole rigmarole again. They just have to submit a report.
Does the IJ...
who then gives it to South Africa, since South Africa took the case. And I suppose the ICJ and South Africa will, together decide whether or not Israel has, in the report that it provides in a month's time, it has to provide a report showing that it is taking measures to not be genocide. And then they'll submit that report and say, look, here's what we've done to not be so genocide as we have been up until now. And then the ICJ in South Africa will say, okay, that sounds reasonable enough.
Or not.
But then it doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter, that's the end of it.
No, at then, maybe, but
legally.
To be honest, I don't have much faith in the ICJ. I don't have faith in any Western institution when it comes to Israel, obviously. Any Western institution or government.
It's a global institution.
Huh?
Technically, it's not Western.
Yeah, but where is it? Where did it happen?
Holland.
Yeah.
Why was it not? Can you put that up? This is the pertinent passage that was highlighted by a member of the South African team. So he's a South African diplomat, Clayton Monyela. Because there's a question of whether or not it calls for a ceasefire. His reading of it was that yes, it does.
I can't put it up. It's telling me something went wrong. Try reloading, and it's not working. So I'm trying to figure out why.
Do I have it?
What is it?
I do. So he tweeted, to be clear, the ICJ has effectively ordered an immediate ceasefire.
Effectively?
Yeah. And for Israel to halt military operations. He quotes the document near. The state of Israel shall ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts described in point 1. Mm-hmm. These are A, killing of members of the group, Palestinians, who were designated officially by the ICJ as a group that is protected by the Genocide Convention. And B, causing serious bodily or mental harm. I'm still quoting the document. Israel must submit a report next month on how they're implementing these measures. Of course, that's pie in the sky. Someone's suspected of genocide and they're going to, whatever. Still, that's the way states versus states works, right, in international law. And then, he has an image, a screenshot of the passage from the document. So he's saying that my reading of that is without saying we demand a ceasefire, which would have been the headline. Mm-hmm. And the ICJ would have had more heat on it, I suppose. The implication of what they're officially legally ordering in this document is a ceasefire immediately. So that's how South Africa read it. That's also how the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank read it. And they would want to get what they can out of it. Israel literally just goes, meh, whatever, officially, with Netanyahu saying this is antisemitism, of course.
Of course it is.
And more, as we'll discuss in a minute. It's the first time now. Well, this is the first time a case has ever been brought against Israel successfully. But this is interesting that the Palestinians were never considered a protected group under the Genocide Convention. It took this process for this to happen. Mm-hmm. Remember, it's been 75 years, the Nakba, all the wars, all the Operation Castleheads and everything else. So I suppose if they say the wheels of justice move slowly, well, then this is just... my first blink was it's a cop-out, but I suppose it's a win. Because on paper, genocide and Israel go together. Mm-hmm. They do. And there's no kind of pushback on that. There was. Israel sent representatives to argue against it. Mm-hmm. But the pushback has had to come out extra legally. The pushback came that night when... Besides tweeting anti-Semitism, Israeli government officials within hours went on the attack, accusing the UN RWA, what was that? UNRWA, something, a Relief and Works Agency, of being involved in the October 7th attacks. Mm-hmm. Such that by the end of the day, was it Friday, the ruling? Mm-hmm. By the end of the day, the media's headlines, it was just a small story. The headline was UN cooperated with Hamas to carry out October 7th attacks. Mm-hmm. by yesterday morning, as of today, this weekend, 9 Western countries have withdrawn funding that their kind of subscriptions, their contributions to this UN agency, to the tune of several $100 million.
Yep. Well, just on the can you put things up on the screen? Throw that one up. This is just hours after the ICJ ruling. The revelations about UNRWA from Israel. It was strong corroborated intelligence, according to an Israeli official. A lot of the intelligence is a result of interrogations of militants who were arrested during the October 7th attack. So it's obviously a joke. So it's like, this CIA interrogation tactic supposedly that produces the answers that you want to hear. Oh yes, we are all working for UNRWA. All of us that stormed out of Gaza on October 7th, a bunch of us were working for UNRWA, according to Israel, according to testimony from Palestinians extracted under torture. So yeah, it's obviously bullshit. And the fact that
the chutzpah.
Well, the most interesting thing about it is that Israel's response is pretty psychopathic in a way, because what they're signaling basically by revealing this, and obviously they had this, ready to go type thing for several weeks.
But they didn't use it in The Hague. They're using it in the information war media trial.
Well, it wouldn't have been relevant in a certain sense to The Hague. This was kept as a response. And the interesting thing about this response is that what they're saying by this, and then getting their lackeys. How many countries was it?
I have a list.
United States, Germany, Canada, Australia, Netherlands, United Kingdom, Italy, Finland, and Switzerland all suspended funds to UNRWA. As a result of these spurious allegations by Israel.
Put this up because it has the amounts involved.
Yeah. USA 223 million, Germany 127 million, okay. Canada 76.8 million, Australia 20 million, 19 million, 12, 3. So 500 million or something like that, $500 million of funding from these states just because Israel said it. Now, what they're saying, the interesting thing about this is what they're saying is that. What they're signaling by this is that, okay, if you're trying to tell us to stop killing Palestinians, dropping bombs on Palestinians, even though it's not legally binding or anything, and I wouldn't have expected Israel to care what the ICJ says, but anyway, the response here is, okay, if you don't want us to bomb them, we'll starve them. So
yeah, this is what you said in October. This is where we go.
So, because by basically saying, by putting this into action, and in one way or another, you're releasing this spurious allegation about, Hamas members or October 7th militants, whatever, being involved in UNRWA, they somehow, just for that bullshit allegation, get all of these states to cut funding to UNRWA, which means that basically there's a significant reduction in aid to the Palestinians, which means Israel is saying, okay, we'll starve them then. But actually in the ruling as well, they were required to ensure the safe passage of humanitarian aid to things. But this is the way around that, right? Because I'm sure the ICJ didn't budget for that little that detail. It's like, okay, we technically we would be okay with facilitating humanitarian aid into Gaza, but what if the people that we'd be handing the aid over to are actually terrorists? Then should we keep on funding? Should we be sending aid to? Would that not be giving aid to terrorists? ICJ.
The allegations are against 12 staff members.
Yeah.
So for perspective, the way Gaza actually functions, they talk about Hamas all the time. Hamas government. There isn't really the housing, the food, the medicines, the hospitals. Most of civil life in Gaza is functionally, structurally run by this agency. There are around 13,000 Palestinians working for UNRWA in Gaza. Well, there were. It's more like 3,000 now because they've either been displaced or killed. 152 officially Palestinian UN staffers have been killed by Israel in Gaza today. So 12 members out of 13,000 is, I think it comes to about 0.04% of them. Remember, they're like you said, they're allegations based on interrogations, like torture. So, so what does that mean? I mean, is there anything else? No, it really is the only basically allowed NGO by Israel to operate in Gaza. So here's the head of the agency saying that that's it, they're finished. If with that, the key funding came from the West, and that's it, they're done. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the UN agency, our operation on which 2 million people depend as the lifeline in Gaza is collapsing. I am shocked such decisions are taken based on alleged behavior of a few individuals. Palestinians in Gaza do not need this additional collective punishment. And Israel has always been gunning for this. This is, well, maybe I don't even want to listen to her. Anyway, I'll just say what it is. An ex-Israeli government official, now she's with some think tank, forget her name. She's on tape though, it's going around Twitter today, was calling for explaining strategy at a kind of powwow that was published, that we need to destroy or at least get rid of this UN agency. That's the key to...
Have you got it?
I have it, yeah. This is January 4th. They've been... I've heard others say who are either involved directly or observe goings on in Gaza that this has been a long-term goal of the Israeli state.
האתגר שלנו במלחמה הוא לחסל את האיום ולא להרתיע אותו, ואנחנו יודעים איך לחסל פעילי טרור, קשה לנו יותר עם רעיון. אונר"א זה המקור של רעיון, שאמרה עינת, היא יולדת עוד ועוד טרוריסטים בכל מיני שיטות, ואי אפשר יהיה לנצח את המלחמה אם אנחנו לא נשמיד את אונר"א, וההשמדה הזו חייבת להתחיל מיד. זה לא רלוונטי לדבר על היום שאחרי. ביום שעכשיו אנחנו חייבים לפעול להכירה של האיומים האלה לחלוטין, או שאנחנו נפספס את חלון ההזדמנויות, כפי שצוין פה כמה וכמה פעמים כבר עשינו. ובהקשר הזה יש שני מכלולי פעולה שאנחנו יכולים להתקדם היום. האחד זה היחס של מדינת ישראל לאונר"א ולמדינות שתורמות לה, והשני זה היחס לאוכלוסייה הפלסטינית שאונר"א משרתת, לפעמים בצורה סמי לגיטימית. כדי להתמודד עם אונר"א עצמה, בוא נזכור שהיא פועלת כאן, בשטחים שישראל כבשה ב-67, מכוח הבקשה של ישראל שהיא תעשה את זה. זה מה שהכניס אותה לפה. ישראל יכולה עכשיו לבקש ממנה להפסיק. ובאותה הזדמנות לכפור במעמד הפליט, שהיא מחלקת מאוד מאוד בנדיבות, כי לפלילית יש תבחינים בינלאומיים. את התעודות של אונר"א אי אפשר להעביר, צריך לבטל. אורתן בחטא, הן צריכות ללכת לפח. מי שמגיע לו, שילך ויבדוק עם ה-UNHCR, אם באמת מגיע לו.
We must destroy them. They can go to hell because this UN agency equals terrorist.
It's the source of an idea.
Yeah.
She says, the idea is that more and more terrorists are born in all kinds of methods. It's impossible to win the war if we do not destroy UNRWA. And this destruction must begin immediately. This is an aid agency, like a UN aid agency that basically does nothing more than just provide aid to people, not just in Palestine, but in different places around the world.
Well, like I said, functionally it has become it's so needed in Gaza that it's the largest employer of Palestinians there.
Because of Israel. Of course, she said that Israel brought UNRWA in 1967 at their request so they can kick them out. And it's like, you brought them in at your request because you had put Gazans in a position where they needed international aid.
Yeah, and you weren't going to feed them.
Yeah. Well, you're blockading the entire territory. So, yeah, just, I don't know, psycho nutbags. I mean, you know, a detailed analysis of these people and what they're saying and stuff isn't really necessary. It's self-evidently psycho nutbaggery. That anybody with any sense can see. Like when you have an Israeli minister or whoever she was, politicians saying, you know, this aid agency is a source of basically terroristic ideas that are that are being spread in Gaza, and we need to destroy this aid agency. You know, while they basically, you know, shunted almost 2 million people into, you know, maybe at this point it's like a quarter of the territory of Gaza, that it was already one of the most crowded places, densely populated places on the planet, and now it's 4 times as densely populated because they've shunted them all into the very south. I mean, the Israelis are basically right now, over the past few number of days, pushing them out of Khan Yunis into Rafah. If you go and look at a map, Rafah is basically the last stop before the Egyptian border. So Khan Yunis is kind of more central Gaza, south central Gaza. They've declared that a kind of no-go area, and that people have to get out of Khan Yunis. So and towards Rafah, and like I said, Rafah is the last stop. So it's getting to the point where it's reaching a denouement. Like, you know, I mean, people need to think about this. Like, Israel has basically at this point made all of the rest of Gaza unlivable, and they pushed 2 million people into, at this point, probably something around 4 miles by 6, maybe 4 by 6 miles. 2 million people into a piece of land 4 by 6 miles. And now they're in the process of cutting off aid to those people, or a major percentage of the aid to them. But even despite that, they've destroyed or otherwise made uninhabitable everything above that. You know, in the other 75% of Gaza, made it unlivable. They're destroying graveyards. They've obviously destroyed most hospitals. They're destroying infrastructure, water, sanitation, electricity infrastructure. There's nowhere for those people to go back to in terms of actually being able to live there. I mean, technically they could, but it would be like a Stone Age kind of living, and there would be one big refugee camp, and it would be for quite a long time. All of them, if they were allowed back into the rest of Gaza, if Israel was to go away and stop bombing completely, they would be the vast majority of those people would be dependent on aid for quite a long time.
It would take a year to remove the rubble.
Yeah.
With machinery they don't have.
So, and that certainly doesn't seem to be Israel's plan, obviously, to just destroy it all, because the ruse about getting rid of Hamas and specifically, you know, destroying the tunnels is obviously a ruse. Was a ruse from the very get-go. It was a cover for their main plan, which was to destroy Gaza and remove the population completely, one way or the other. There was a report today in one of the UK papers, whatever, broadsheets, saying that 80% of the tunnels still exist. So the whole idea of destroying the tunnels, because they've moved all the way down, right? But they're not destroying tunnels as they go, right? 80% of them still exist. They've only destroyed a small percentage of the tunnels. Most of the Hamas kind of fighters and resistance and other Palestinian faction resistance are still alive. So that doesn't seem to be the goal. The goal isn't to specifically kill all of Hamas, because then that wouldn't be possible anyway. So it was a bullshit idea from the very beginning, because Hamas is a part of the Palestinian people, and to that extent, they're right when they say
Hamas is Gaza.
Hamas is the Palestinian is Gazans, and Gazans are Hamas, or Gazans are Palestinian. Of course they are. They all are united in the resistance towards Israeli occupation, going back since the creation of Israel, basically. So that wasn't serious. They were never serious about destroying Hamas. They know very well, as many people have said, that by killing 25,000+ people at this point, they have created multiple more generations of Hamas and Palestinian militants who will hate Israel. They know that very well. They're not stupid, right?
Yeah. So they have to go all the way.
And they're not destroying the tunnels. They're not really interested in us. They want what they have done. The only thing they've really done is kill as many Palestinians as they think they could get away with, civilians, and destroy as much infrastructure as they possibly could, and they'll continue to do that. And the obvious point of doing that, their goal in doing that, is to make Gaza unlivable, and at the same time they're pushing all the Palestinians into a smaller and smaller territory, and now they're cutting off food. I mean, do you have to be some kind of I don't know, well, not a rocket science, but do you have to be some kind of a big brain or something to figure out what's actually going on there, what the obvious goal is there? Like, I mean, they want to destroy the Palestinian people in one way or another. They probably have lots of different plans, possibilities of how that could happen, but I don't think they're planning on killing them with bombs. So really the only other way that can happen is to put them in a position where there's only two options. One is that, well, both of them go together. The first stage is create a humanitarian crisis and a health crisis, let's say, deny food, deny sanitation, create the conditions for sickness, illnesses to spread, and push people into a situation where they're both there's illnesses or some kind of outbreak of some kind of illness spreading through the population. A lot of people are in serious danger of dying, and also because they're all malnourished and there's no real proper living conditions. And at that point, it's either if they stay there, they're all going to die. A lot of them are going to die from either starvation or sickness. At that point, the pressure is put on the international community to take them somewhere else, because they obviously can't stay there.
Yeah.
So there's nowhere for them to go. They can't go further back up. But where are they going to go? Israel's not going to take them. Nobody's ever brought that up. So you create the conditions where a majority or significant majority of the Palestinians in Gaza are going to die through sickness or starvation. And then you just stand back and go to the international community, say, are you going to allow this to happen? And they'll blame, you can imagine the Israelis, I mean, certainly I can imagine them saying that it's heartless of the international community to sit by and watch the people of Gaza starve and die from illness and do nothing. It's heartless for Egypt to sit there and watch this happening. You know what I mean? That's real psycho stuff when you've created that situation and then you blame others for not doing something about it. But that's their plan from the very beginning.
Yeah, and the Western this happened so fast that you would blink and then miss it. Western countries, in the space of a day, at the snap of fingers, all knew what to do, withdraw the funding. That's just like, and the next day it's something else. We've moved on already. That's already accomplished. There was no kind of weeks-long struggle, back and forth in the Western media, kind of shaping public perception to get used to it. They just did it in one day.
The message goes out. They sent an email to the US, Germany, Canada, Australia, Netherlands, United Kingdom, Italy, Finland and Switzerland and said, y'all stop your own funding, please. Yes,
Please.
sir.
But how did that happen? Here's context, right? So this is from 2022. Israel pleaded with Western governments to stop these NGOs, and they told them to take a hike. The Overton window here has shifted so rapidly, so far to the right, so pro-Israel. In 2021, Israel falsely labeled 6 Palestinian NGOs as terrorist organizations after failing to provide any evidence to back up the claim. In this case today, last week, there was evidence, just allegations. Oh, sure, yeah, no problem, done. 9 EU states rejected the argument back then.
So back when people were.
This has obviously been a wish of Israel for a long time, and now it's.
What influence does Israel have over those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 countries, Western countries? What influence does the Israeli lobby or whoever, or Israel the state, or Israel the government, Netanyahu, whoever, what influence does it have over them where it can make them basically complicit in creating a humanitarian crisis in Gaza and maybe complicit in the starvation of 2 million people? When a couple of years ago, like you said, they dismissed allegations and now they don't. I don't know. Did they just turn the screws? They have like maybe they just squeezed harder, because like Israel has always had the balls of these Western countries, European countries and America in its hand, so it just squeezes a bit harder a couple of years later and it's like, all right, we'll do it. Because, the Israelis are like ball squeezers, Is that anti-Semitic? I don't know.
Well, the anti-Semitic global conspiracy theory, right? I'm just going to articulate, because this is what the anti-Semitic global conspiracy theory is, that certain powerful, influential Jews can pull financial strings and get governments to do things. That's the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory.
Financial strings, yeah. And others.
That's been the key one, but not necessarily. Information.
Blackmail-y strings too.
Blackmail-y
but
strings.
Financial blackmail, same thing, right?
That's the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And that's kind of like the news.
Why is that anti-Semitic?
Don't know. Don't
But like,
don't ask.
Using finances to exert pressure on people, states, whatever, is pretty much as old as human history, right? So why is it really bad to say that might be happening? just because Israel's doing it. Why is it anti-Semitic? Yeah.
In completely unrelated news,
Isn't it strange that the anti-Semitic, calling someone an anti-Semite to shut down any criticism of me? So, like, if I hold the cards on anti-Semitism, let's say, and anything anybody says about me, no matter what I do, no matter how egregious my actions, I can just call anybody who's making those accusations against me anti-Semitic, and they immediately shut down. It's such a horrible thing to say. No one wants to be in any way implicated in being an anti-Semite. It's very similar to being accused of being a paedophile. Coincidence? Anyway, I'll just leave that one hanging there.
here's the tweet from Ben Giever. Israeli. He's in the Israeli cabinet. He's one of the super far right Israeli parties. Itamar Ben Giever, on the day of the ICJ ruling.
The Hague Schmag. Hague Schmag. Schmag.
It didn't translate properly.
The Hague Schmag.
That's what it would be. It's the Yiddish cutesy turn of phrase in OEU.
Does Schmag mean something in Yiddish?
Schmiel. No, it's Hague Schmeg. He's
Yeah.
It's where they take a word and put Schmiel Spiel in front. You know that they. We use it in English all the time. You know.
Jew schmoo.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Jew schmooze.
As in whatever.
Jew schmooze.
He doesn't care.
Yeah. Of course he doesn't care. Yeah. But these people have been planning this business in Gaza for anybody who thinks that this is just like, oh, October 7th happened, what will we do? Let's make up a plan. Like I've said a few times previously, before now, that this has been a goal of Israel. Notable Israeli figures have talked about this project, this need to deal with their Palestinian problem definitively for at least 20 years, probably longer, but they've publicly talked about it for 20 years, different Israeli luminaries, and talked about it openly. So the idea that they don't have a plan, when you've been publicly talking about it, you can imagine what's going on in private. They've had different plans on the table, how to deal with this, how to implement this solution to the Palestinian problem for decades. And it's probably, there wasn't really many different variables in terms of how they could go about it. It was probably always fairly straightforward. They probably always came to the same conclusion, which was, well, we just need to make Gaza unlivable through bombing, and we need to push the Palestinians out. All right, has everybody agreed? Yeah, I don't see another way to go about the final solution than that. That seems to be pretty final in terms of how it would go. So, and then they put it into action on October 7th. And of course, as we've said before, October 7th was, very likely a put-up job, basically. I mean, it's kind of gone away now. People have stopped talking about it as time has passed. But at the time, and for a few weeks after October 7th, there was a lot of talk on social media, and different people, penning articles about the evidence that it looks like there was a stand-down order to facilitate the events of October 7th. And there's a significant, substantial evidence that Israeli troops themselves killed quite a lot of Israeli civilians. And of course, we would add in that it's very likely that there was some kind of black ops, secret team, death squad type element involved as well, involved in killing Israeli civilians. I've said this. I'm having flashbacks. I'm having deja vu's to saying this so many times before on different shows and in articles and stuff about how people can, because we've talked about that before. Obviously, it's about false flags, 9/11, etc., and FBI terror plots and all that kind of stuff. There's massive amounts of evidence that is a reality. That's part of state policy, particularly Western state policy, but it's statecraft, right, and has been for a very long time. And there's anybody who has inform themselves about the evidence, and official, real, hard evidence from government inquiries and all kind of stuff, cannot doubt that the kind of idea of a false flag or of kind of inflicting a wound on yourself or supporting terrorist organizations that you claim to be fighting and all that kind of stuff. There's no doubt that that is a part of statecraft. So anybody at this point who would react badly or dismiss what I just said about October 7th just doesn't understand. Doesn't know the evidence, doesn't know how governments work and have worked for a very long time, doesn't know that is a very standard part of how they go about achieving their goals when necessary.
Yeah.
So
in a sense, they're kind of excluded from the conversation because it's like children, trying to pitch in their 2 cents with the adults who know a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, guys, this doesn't really, just carry on. Doesn't concern you.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, you just carry on, think what you want to think, but we're just working from reality here.
I mean,
we're the reality-based community, let's say.
Do you want to? I mean, people kind of know what they have. They think of Epstein, that network. So there's blackmail. There's a lot of surveillance as well. It's not just like they know your dark stuff. Like, this is going to sound too crazy, but here's some context, right? So 10 years ago plus, this happened. It was officially reported as an accidental gaffe because a microphone was left on. I doubt it. I think it's more like the microphone was targeted and it was always listening. And when it found something it didn't like, it got reported internationally. Headline 2011, Sarkozy and Obama's Netanyahu gaffe broadcast via microphones. The French president at the time described the Israeli prime minister, also at the time Netanyahu, as a, quote, liar in a private exchange with Obama at last week's G20 summit. I can't stand him, he's a liar, Sarkozy told Obama. The US president responded by saying, you're fed up with him, I have to deal with him every day. Now, the claim is that, well, a thing was switched on, so journalists overheard it in a room next door. Like they would be so like indiscreet or uncareful. I think it's more likely a hidden mic. It was always listening. The walls have ears kind of thing. I'm also reminded, like, also about a decade ago, it quietly came out, maybe not that far, I think it was while Trump was president, that Washington, D.C. there's some huge network of, again, cameras, mics, everything, everywhere, that's separate from the main D.C. public official police surveillance network. And apparently all of the data goes to Israel. I'll try and find that. Washington, D.C., Israelis. My network. No, I'm not going to be able to. It's bringing up actual spy networks, but I remember there was something specific about like a physical network, like mics on the street and stuff like that. Anyway, so I suppose what I'm getting at is the kind of, I'm not trying to give a pass to the Western governments that every time Israel says jump, they just say how high. There is it takes two to tango, and there's a willing recipient in Israel's crimes. Of course there are. Americans have shipped all the bombs that have killed all those Palestinians. They're not like, they don't get a pass because Israel made us do it. Hang on, no, you did it. It's just that the sheer, it's possible that there's so much, not just dirt, but constant monitoring. Like it was announced today that someone's going to put up like $100 million to run people against AOC in New York. I mean, surely she's been a boon for the left, the establishment, the legacy. Well, no, because of where she stands on Israel, the lobby is going to work to get her out, replaced with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so strict, certainly in the United States, maybe also the UK, but really, where isn't in the Anglosphere, in the Western world?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a politician that's stridently, not even against Israel, that's just stridently pointing out the obvious
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to this issue,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to stay in power long. You'll be gone. And you won't be re-elected. Or you won't get elected at all, in Jeremy Corbyn's case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the campaign against him was insane.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no specific issue with Israel going on, but they knew his background.
Mm-hmm.
And that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
He supported the Palestinians a lot in the 80s and 90s. He cannot be prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
Again, though, it's mutual because the British establishment in its own right also agreed that he was public enemy number one.
Mm-hmm.
So, the interest met. It's not exclusively an outside network that it blame,
Mm-hmm.
which is where, obviously it's murky. We're like you say, we're plumbing the depths here of.
Well, the Israelis are a chosen people,
Yeah, and there's a few other people who would like to also believe they are
They're chosen. Yeah,
American exceptionalists.
they're an anomaly.
Over and above
I'd
that.
say they're an anomaly in terms of the peoples of the world, at least in the modern era. They're definitely an anomaly in terms of how they view the world, how they view themselves, and how they view themselves in relation to the world. There's not really many. I don't think there's any other country in the world, or state, or group of people in the world who view themselves in that way, and they view themselves as victims. They're not the chosen people; they're the slighted people. They're the victimized people, and they're out for revenge, basically. That's a mentality. It's just an aberrant, kind of messed up perspective that kind of has been seeded amongst the population. Successive generations of Israelis have been brought up, and Jews have been brought up with that belief, and
It's mad because
It's just
they're
fucks
so
things up big time.
materially successful.
yeah, but that's part of it, right? That's I mean, they have to kind of, they're almost like the Masons in a certain sense, like a Masonic kind of, in the way that they, secret handshakes and helping each other out, and keep it within the family type thing. They're similar in that way. They're like a secret group, although they're obviously open. They're quite open about it, but they're not really open about that aspect of it because it would tend to set them apart from the rest of humanity or people. Other countries. It would set them apart as being not quite conspecific, like you don't really see yourselves as part of the rest of humanity, I mean, they do have, Goyim, is really religious or Judaic kind of speech is this idea of the Jews and the Goyim being the rest of humanity. So they do set themselves apart, at least in the religious perspective, but that filters down to maybe a slightly more watered down version amongst the more secular Jews, but they still have that idea. And it's quite appealing because it makes you, again, it's transformed into being special, right? Being special. Separate is to be special. To be separate is to be special. And they go about, when you have this victim mentality and that's never again and it might happen again and these people are against us, look what they did to us in the past, they'll do it again at any time. These Goyim can't basically help themselves. It comes around every few generations or whatever, it comes around where they just want to just mindlessly get the Jews. So we need to always be on alert, and we are separate for that reason. You can see how, if you believe that, you would see yourself as a separate group who are under threat all the time, and then you do have to kind of collaborate with your kind, let's say, and your in group. To the exclusion of others, and that's why it's pretty clear that most Jews who are activist Jews, let's say, like Ben Shapiro and people like that, and lots of others, it's pretty clear that they, when it comes down to it, regardless of what country they live in, their first priority is Israel, because their first priority being to Israel means it's really the same as their first priority is to themselves. because they have this belief that it happened before, the Goyim will periodically try to kill us, and we have this homeland and we need to keep ourselves separate and protected and together, and Israel is the center point for that. At least it's a place where we can go and live and have as our own and a protected space, and we're armed to the teeth and all that kind of stuff. And if these other people, ultimately these Goyim in America, everywhere in Congress, all of the known Jewish people are all potential threats, we can't just sit about and wait and hope that they won't do it again. We have to take action to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And how are we going to do that? Well, we've got to get inside their systems and make sure that we direct their systems in a way that is safe for the Jews, to make sure that it never happens again. I mean, that sounds anti-Semitic, because this is what's shoved down our throat by the Western media all the time. The whole Holocaust and how Jews have to be, anti-Semitism on the rise. What do they mean by anti-Semitism is on the rise? Why are they so afraid of that? Because like the BBC will report that, but the implication is that Goyim are going in the direction of doing it again against the Jews. So even the BBC believes that part of it, right? Or presumably believes it, or I think most people do, at least.
It's implied, but why else would you describe?
Of
There's
course.
been a massive rise in anti-Semitism. ...
Where does that go? Right.
It's about to go Hitler.
So the BBC believes it on behalf of the Jews. Certainly the Jews believe it, have done for a long time. So imagine if you really believe that, what you would do over many generations. What kind of strategy or plan would you come up with to make sure it doesn't happen again? If you think it's such a prescient or such a pressing need and danger at any moment, at any time, in any one generation, it can happen. Surely, if you took it really seriously, you would do something to try and make sure it doesn't happen again, right? You can't just trust, because look at the way they present it just happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like there's specific conditions arise where you could say the Jews could look at it and say, look at it historically and say, well, look, it only ever happened when we did this or when we did that. No, it's like it's presented as it's just mindless.
It's completely indigenous or endogenous to them.
It's beamed into their heads.
Nothing to do with us.
Yeah, it just comes up, it rises up within them every few generations, and they want to kill the Jews. Yeah. And you ask them, why are you going to kill the Jews? And they say, I don't know. I just need to kill the Jews.
That is conveyed. That's what they imply.
Don't cut this out, right? What I just said, right?
Yeah.
Don't take a snip of that and put it on YouTube, right? I always provide the context of what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
That's the way it's presented. I mean, we're being... Everybody else, non-Jews, are being presented with that idea all the time.
Yeah.
You know, in one way or another, you're being presented with the idea that you, a non-Jew, could at any moment participate in another Holocaust. And, you know, it's weird again, like I mentioned pedophilia before, the anti-Semitism claim with pedophilia, but also that idea of non-Jews just being at any moment overtaken by this bloodlust to kill Jews or something is similar to what they accuse white people of as far as minorities or blacks, right? Mm-hmm. That you just have this... well, it's probably under the same umbrella, right? It's unconscious racism, right? It's the same thing. What I'm talking there about, the claim about, you know, non-Jews periodically wanting to kill Jews, is the same as unconscious racism that white people are accused of against blacks or other minorities, non-whites, that you don't even know it.
It's always there. You're born with it.
Yeah, and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
You're not even aware of it.
It has to be pointed out to you through
right. So now, whether or not that's true, or you know, that claim is being made all the time, both by Jews and by minority groups and African Americans, etc. But in the case of Jews, if you really believe that's the case, and they seem to really believe that that's the case, that's what whites tend to do. Like I'll ask again, what strategy would you come up with over many years, multiple generations of Jewish Israeli minds in positions of power as to how to prevent this, how to stop the worst from happening? It seems natural to me that you would come up with an idea that you really need to get inside that minds of get inside their minds, but more importantly, get inside their political systems, and to direct them in a way that makes sure that anti-Semitism never gets beyond a certain threshold. And once you open that door, you're into everything, right? You're into Israeli lobby, Walter Mearsheimer's book, Israeli lobby, really strong Israeli lobby in the UK and European countries, Mossad, intelligence agency, spying, spy rings, blackmail, all that kind of stuff. Everything will be
election
allowed.
influencing.
Everything, yeah. Everything will be allowed in the interest of making sure that this never happens
War
again.
and peace decisions.
Yeah.
Mass migration decisions.
So it's kind of strange that just to say that, to suggest that that's what's happening, that's what the Mossad and the Israeli government, that's their perspective, to say that is some kind of anti-Semitic canard is weird, because it's a logical deduction from what the Jews and the Israelis themselves accuse non-Jews of doing and being, which is fundamentally or latently anti-Semitic, having a latent or hatred of Jews, unconscious. And nobody disagrees with that, because that's what the Israelis say, that's what the BBC says, in one way or another. So all I'm saying is, so if you believe that, what would the Jews do? What would you do if you believed that you were under that kind of threat from almost the rest of the world? And if you had the means to do it, how would you make sure that you protected yourself against that kind of unconscious hatred that could well up? Well, if it was existential and you had the power and or you had the influence, or you'd try to develop the influence and develop the power to make sure that those other non-Jews basically were never in a position to do it again. But you'd need to really have a lot of, you'd have to have a lot of control over them,
It's a shitty strategy, though, because it's self-perpetuate. It just creates the situation where the next pogrom comes along.
Yeah, but that's, self-fulfilling
I mean,
prophecy.
the ADL, reports a couple of weeks ago, anti-Semitism is up 360%. Well, no shit. I mean, obviously people are linking it to Israel, but it's more than just that. I mean, it's so it's such an insane strategy. I mean, if you want to retain your in-group privileges, yet hide among the people you consider the other, what's with constantly drawing attention to yourself while trying to constantly police their reactions and occasionally taser them? Like, you can only taser a dog so if you really see them as animals, right? You can only taser them so much before they're going to inevitably come back. Like, it's happened so often before.
Well, they put themselves in a bind by
Right.
putting themselves in the middle of creating the state of Israel on Arab land and kicking the Arabs off it, and creating a perpetual problem where those Arabs that are kicked off and the Arab countries around, those people you kicked out of their land and spread them around in close proximity and as a diaspora in neighbouring countries and within your own country that you created in 1948, well, you're always going to be in a position where you're going to be, fighting those people that you kind of dispossessed, that you committed a crime against. They're going to want retribution. And if you don't sort it out and come to some agreement, then you're going to always have a threat to you. And then you're going to periodically respond to that threat. And if you're in a position of sufficient power and dominance, you're going to look like Israel has looked over the past few months, which is that you're going to just be, it's going to be shooting fish in a barrel type thing. It's just going to be wholesale slaughter. And then all the Goyim will be, not all of them, but a lot of them will be anti-Semitic, i.e. they'll criticize Israel.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Can you put that back, Scotty? So what does this involve? Is this like, physical attacks against Jews? They break it down into 4 bullet points. There you go. Actually, what we're talking about here are 56 incidents of, I think this is just in the United States. Up 360%, okay. 56 incidents of physical assault, 500, so that's actual people who legitimately got and anti-Semitism. So that's a 5 out of 5, full on in your face anti-Semitism.
They got an anti-Semitism.
They got, they got
No, that's a good way to describe it. I like that.
554 incidents of vandalism. Okay, but hang on a second. The wave, for example, the wave of media outrage in Paris back in October when this kicked off. Remember when there were Stars of David being spray painted on walls in predominantly Jewish-lived neighborhoods in Paris? Turns out that was a Zionist organization that did that deliberately, and when caught, they said, "Well, we were just doing it to be proud of our country." But that's not how the press reported it at the time. They reported it as anti-Semitic attacks and vandalism. Okay, and whatever. But the vast majority, 1,347 incidents of verbal or written harassment. And then the last one is just a joke. 1,307 rallies, i.e. the protests for Palestinians. There weren't torch-burning, Charlottesville right-wing, neo-Nazi rallies screaming, Jews will not replace us. That's rallies like this. When they use the term rallies, it's meant to evoke Nuremberg rallies. It's the fucking Palestinian protest.
Yeah. What's that word for people who are super sensitive to any criticism on anything they don't like?
Touchy.
They rage at it. You can't criticize them. You can't point out what they've done wrong. You can't.
Narcissistic.
Snowflake, isn't it?
Oh. Well, it's the ultimate identity group.
Those are microaggressions.
This is identity politics, like identity geopolitics.
Those would all be if most of those incidents of anti-Semitism were being reported by, let's say, minority groups or something, they would be described as a lot of them would be described as microaggressions, right? I felt offended by what you said, but the only way it's not described as that and dismissed as that, the only reason is because all of them carry with them the implication that any more of this, and there's going to be another Holocaust.
Yeah. And it's similar with Trump. Trump, orange man, bad. Why? Well, ... The part they left out always is, well, any moment now he can build concentration camps and put its enemies in. It's similar. It's
basically. Did you see this? This kind of sums it up. I posted this on Twitter there during the week. Kind of summed it up for me.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And actually, that doesn't mean religious Jews would be like, yeah, we're trying to bring about our prophecy, indeed. But they're the ones who will be the victims of their own actions. And like I said, they've so much going for them. Just call it off, guys. You've got everything going for you. Put in a phone call. Governments just do whatever. But, yesterday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. To cap off the ironies of the situation where, obviously, what's going on in Gaza. There's been no let-up as well whatsoever. Everyone saw the footage last week of the family waving the white flag. The man who was interviewed by British ITV moments later when the camera man and the journalist, I presume, walked away was shot dead. So it's not a leap to presume that they saw that he was being interviewed. And that had no effect on their optics, on their concern about what anyone else thinks. They executed him.
Yeah, but Israel's been doing that for a long time.
Oh, yeah, it's not new.
It's weird. It's strange. Like, obviously, there's some people, like I said in previous shows, that there's a bunch of people on social media who are just like new to this. You just crawled out of some rock, like, I don't know what they were doing. They were living the American dream or something like that for the past 20 years, and then only woke up recently because of, I don't know, COVID or whatever it is, something that disturbed their reality, and they're like, what's going on? Huh? Oh, that's bad. And they have these hot takes and stuff, and they just have no history, no understanding of the history of the whole thing, so they just have dodgy takes. You need to understand history, and I'm not talking about just the past 20 years, but you need to ideally understand history going back a lot further than that, to at least have a better ability to assess any given situation, because things don't change, you know.
Okay, let's move on. I mean, it's related, but there's lots of other news to get through. So what we've seen is Israel will just carry on, but there is a force of some type that's, you know, it's affecting them for sure. This is from today. All week long, there have been a few reports from various self-styled resistance groups in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. This is a report today in Al Mayadeen. Drone strikes Israeli naval facility in Haifa Bay. I think I saw others. The first one that we saw was a few weeks, 2 weeks ago now, where it was claimed. And I later saw a photo, but no footage, because the Israelis, like the Ukrainians, will keep a tight lid on that, of a cruise missile hitting a port facility also in Haifa. So just scroll down. Where was this fired from, allegedly? Okay, this doesn't say. A drone from somewhere, a mystery drone. But this has been picking up. They are showing the resistance, pro-Palestinian Muslim militias / it's super. They're playing the Israelis' game with them, because you remember, of course, Syria was all like, well, they're moderate rebels, moderate terrorists, or something like that. You know, the Iraq, Iran, Yemen, and Hezbollah, of course, are playing a kind of similar shadow game, where something hits, maybe not quite clear where from, and it's not from a state military, so Israel could just calm yourselves, but it's come from one of those countries. The other news pertinent to this, the Houthis hitting a British tanker. So many ironies in this. The tanker was carrying Russian oil, repackaged in India, presumably I'm not sure presumably where it was going. I heard that it was going to the United States. But the Houthis apparently know. They must have a quite exact knowledge, even though it was flagged under some other country. They knew it was a British interest, this tanker. Not sure what they hit them with, but it caused a fire. Rumors that it sunk. It didn't. The fire was actually put out by the next day. It was put out by an Indian naval vessel, which came to its rescue. There's more photos online. I've seen some grainy footage too of it burning. I doubt that's taken by the Houthis. Maybe it was the Indian vessel that came to rescue. Other movements on things. You know that the Iraqis want, they said, all foreign troops to leave, but the message is really for American troops to leave Iraq. The US has officially responded, let's talk about it. So they're not just dismissing it out of hand. There are other rumors that American troops will be doing a full drawdown from Syria, like getting out of there. There's clearly a struggle going on or at least within the establishment, if not within the Pentagon itself, about what to do. I imagine this is also with one eye on the U.S. elections. Maybe they want to say the right things, but doing them will be different. We'll see. It's clearly like a hot topic in the United States. I don't think we can. I've wondered for a few weeks now: is there a risk of overstating what the Houthis, or even Iran or Hezbollah, can really do as any kind of a countermeasure? But I think now, like, this development a few days ago, did I hear it correctly? The Biden White House has sent Jake Sullivan to China to plead with Beijing, to plead with Iran, to plead with the Houthis to stop targeting ships in the Red Sea. I mean, they've done supposedly eight waves of cruise missile strikes against targets in Yemen. And apparently it's not working if this has to happen. I don't know. Maybe this was... I think this was an American press release. So this wasn't like a rumor. It's unsubstantiated. Does that not go up? The last one, yeah. Scroll down. I think Bertrand is quoting. Yeah, he's quoting it from FT. Click the one on the right. The article is. Yeah, U.S. urges China to help curb Red Sea attacks by Iran-backed Houthis. They wouldn't need to do that if they had utter confidence in their Aegis destroyers and Tomahawk cruise missiles. Diplomatic pressure on Beijing. Beijing, who you know, kind of... this time last year, they were doing the whole balloon gate and saber rattling against China. And now it's like, China, do the responsible thing, will you? Tell Iran to tell the Houthis to stop doing that. Like, we're in a new world here where the Houthis are having an effect. I didn't get it in time for the show, but there was an Israeli news report with subs translated. It's gone. I've seen it a few times now, where something like 70% of cargo is not reaching Israel.
Yeah.
And it's worse in their southern port. They have a port, Eilat, which is the Israeli port on the Red Sea. It's like dead.
Yeah, but they're...
and it's even affecting their med ports.
Yeah, but it's... Yeah, exactly. That's why they're talking about them expanding the... You know, the Houthis or whoever expanding the attempted blockade in Israel to the Persian Gulf and to the Med, although it makes it more difficult, obviously. But because the Israelis are just shipping stuff over land, you know, from the Persian Gulf, you know. They're diverting shipments, you know. They're taking them off in probably in the UAE or Saudi or whatever, or maybe not Saudi Arabia, but or maybe Qatar. I don't know exactly where, but it's basically going across. A lot of their stuff's going across land now, from maybe Kuwait. I don't hear much about Kuwait, but anyway, Kuwait and through probably through Saudi Arabia, obviously, and then Jordan, and then Israel that way. Land transport, you know.
There's another incident last week where Pentagon press release describes how the Houthis fired 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles toward the U.S.-owned MV Maersk Detroit, transiting the Gulf of Aden. 1 missile impacted the sea, and the 2 other missiles were successfully engaged and shot down by the USS Gravely. Interesting name. No reported injuries or damage to the ship. Okay, good. So that sounds like it's working, you know, and the ship, you presume, carried on its way. No, it didn't. The part they left out in the press release was the ship was like, we're not taking our chances. And it turned around and went around Africa anyway. It had no confidence in the British-American ability to give it safe passage to the Red Sea. Once it saw a missile hit like to starboard, it was like, we're out of here. So it's... The ICJ won't be able to rein in, but there are real-world effects happening for consequences of what Israel is doing. And all it takes is a relatively tiny group. Like, the Houthis control, like, 1/5 of Yemen. The part that matters, I suppose. The most populated parts in the west.
Yeah.
Bonkers. What did you think of Elon Musk's?
Are you back to the Jews again?
Well, you gotta like marvel at the chutzpah. There's no kind of attempt to, I don't know, be careful with how you do this or something. Who organized the trip?
Ben Shapiro.
No. Here it is here. Entrepreneur Elon Musk joins Chabad, people have been telling me it should be pronounced, Menachem Margolin, who chairs the European Jewish Association.
Does he have any tunnels under his Chabad Center?
That is the same place. That logo you see, look at the account name, Chabad Lubavitch HQ.
Yeah, but he's a European one.
He may be, but it's all. This is the organization that the building you see as their icon. That's where it took place.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I'm wondering if
that's a Jew tunnel place.
I was wondering if Rabbi Menachem Margolin, who is the European Jewish Association chair, wherever he hangs out, if he's got tunnels under his. I'm assuming they have a building in Europe, right, where he lives.
Right.
Or not lives, but where he organizes the Chabad Lubavitch or Chabad Lubavitch, meets, let's say. And I'm just wondering if they have tunnels as well. Maybe Sean should check under the European Jewish Association's headquarters just to see. But yeah, so he organizes. Is that what you're saying?
That organization organized it, and
right.
They have him there to meet him and Genocide Shapiro.
So the one whose headquarters, the organization whose headquarters in New York was recently discovered to have tunnels underneath it with children's mattresses and strollers, etc. Have Elon Musk has teamed up with them to go to Auschwitz and bend the knee.
That is, how else can you interpret that?
Obviously, but it's an example of. It's an example of what we were talking about earlier on. Like if you're part of Judaism, if you're a Jew, maybe you don't have to be part of Judaism. You don't have to be religious Jew. You can be a secular Jew, a cultural Jew.
You identify as part of. It's identity politics. If I identify as
a Jew, yeah. Gazan, for example, is a cultural Jew, whatever that means. It's like we were saying earlier on, if you're Jewish and you subscribe, which I think most of them do, to this idea that they are under a potential threat at any time of Holocaust 2.0 or something, and you've been aware of that, and you and your forefathers, your forefathers have been aware of that for a long time, and you built up this system in a certain sense where you need to keep track of all of the goy, because they may do another Holocaust, right? So that's what you believe. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's what, if you believe that, then you would have to have that kind of influence or try to achieve that kind of influence and control over major players in non-Jewish society in order to make sure it never happens again. Never happens again. So that's an example. Elon Musk is an example. Obviously, Elon Musk, I don't think he's a stupid person. The stuff he's talked about, antisemitism and all the different scandals that he's had on scandals, quote unquote, on Twitter, when he said different things that apparently were anti-Semitic and stuff. And all the things he said about free speech and all that kind of stuff. The guy obviously isn't stupid. He can think, but when you see him in this position where he is, going and basically tipping his hat and paying homage, and it suggests that someone was able to talk to him and explain to him in the right terms why this was important and not just important but necessary for him to do, in a way that made him accept that he really should do it, despite the fact that he may not necessarily agree with it, or he may not otherwise have done it of his own volition, but he was made to understand that this was extremely important. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't just a good argument. I'm pretty sure it came with. I'm sure it was a good argument, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't just do it because it's the right thing to do. It was more like do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do for your businesses and for Twitter in terms of advertisers and financing and all sorts of other, to avoid all sorts of other potential problems that could come up with any of your businesses.
But the whole thing screams like, if you don't do this,
you're gone. Yeah, you're in trouble.
That's what's conveyed here, and who cannot understand that? Even if they go, oh gosh, yeah, and they're afraid to kind of articulate in the privacy of their own mind what the implications are. It's conveyed to everyone. He's now done this twice since October 7th. Went to Israel.
Since 9/11 times 1,000, yeah.
And now this. And in between he had the thing with it the two things that he cannot have, firewall them in his mind completely. He goes once, he comes back, then he has a spat indirectly with the ADL because it all begins with them and encouraging advertisers to flee from X. And he's at this forum in New York, organized by the New York Times, and he tells one of the most powerful Jews in the United States of America, the owner of Disney Corp, to go F yourself. Because what you're threatening here is blackmail. He called it out. So he's crystal clear on that. And then in between, he's got 2 trips, one to Auschwitz, one to Israel. And there's no way, I'm thinking there's no way he can't be like, his saving grace might be that he's kind of naive but in a way that he's acting it. Did you see, like, there's a clip of him following the visit, they have a sit down and Ben Shapiro basically interviews him in front of an audience of the European Jews Association.
Yeah, I didn't watch it, but yeah, all of it. But
and he's basically do you want to listen to it? He's basically like, no, I have a clip. It's just a minute. He can't not. I'm sure he understands pretty well. People are bashing him up one way and the other for bending the knee, but like, what else is he supposed to do? So the best he can do is this: make light of it.
Yeah, I grew up around a lot of Jewish people. I went to Hebrew preschool, Rachel Spiro in South Africa. My name is very Jewish.
I will tell you that for the past 10 years, people have assumed in my community that you were Jewish until I informed them otherwise.
Yeah.
Elon is a pretty Jewish name.
He is super Jewish.
Yeah.
And then I went to Israel when I was 13. Visited Masada. I'm certainly checking the boxes on a lot of things. And
check the boxes.
Like I said, most of my friends are Jewish, just worked out that way. So
embarrassing.
Sometimes I guess maybe I forget. Am I Jewish? I'm Jewish. Aspirationally Jewish.
Yeah, well, it's definitely saying all the right things, and it's quite embarrassing. Yeah, but what are you going to do? I mean, that says to me that people made it clear, maybe not necessarily Ben Shapiro, but someone made it clear to him that you better get with a program, or there are ways and means to.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be gradually, at least, or it already is taking effect, a clampdown on Twitter. He's been unlucky. He obviously never approached it with this in mind, at all, Israel. But Israel became an issue soon after. He's like busting it wide open for free speech. And he's like digging in his heels, go F yourselves to the advertisers, the people, and the rest of that speech that at the New York Times forum was like, well, fine, don't come back. The people will, vox populi, vox dei. They'll judge, they'll decide, let them figure it out kind of attitude, But now that's being reined in, and it probably is going to be back to at best free speech light, because this is a topic that everyone sooner or later figures this out. This is kind of like the ceiling, the glass ceiling, on where you can go with stuff. That's why we generally don't want to talk about it at all, because you can do it, but that's the end of you. At least in whatever format you're trying to. And he's got a big format. He's bought a huge investment for free speech. Will he ever even see the returns on it? Probably not. Is it a business venture? I don't know. It looks like a sunk cost to me, unless he can convince enough people to subscribe, to pay basically as a donation, to see the value for what it is, for having a public town hall forum that's genuinely open. But it's not going to work. Not in the long term. I think they're going to in stages bring it to heel, and it's not even going to be Israel or Zionist connected issues. Like the European Union is breathing down his neck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
threatening to rumble, just black it out.
Yeah, just not because of not being pro-Israel enough, but rather not being pro-censorship of speech enough. Basically, allowing people to say things that aren't approved. Basically, So, yeah, it's crazy. There's a lot of anti-Semitisms in what you just said, So,
are you going to sanction me?
I might, yeah. Maybe, yeah. Well, you get to the point where on certain topics you can't say anything. I mean, it's crazy. You can't actually speak. Can't have an opinion on something for fear of being censored or something, or being, I don't know, condemned as something or other. But the whole thing's a joke, really. It's just a bad joke. But that's what they're doing. That's what they do. That's what they want to do, and let them go ahead. Do your worst. I have already won. So yeah, but speaking of propaganda, the Ukraine thing is kind of funny. They ramped up the Ukraine thing this past week, particularly the UK. The UK is obviously joined at the hip as a British government and the American government are in a holy alliance. And this week they told British public that this is part of it, but this one stuck out for me. It was in case you missed it, apparently the West is going to go to war. Over the past week, we've been told that the West is going to go to war with Russia, unless, of course, we do everything possible to, I don't know, make Ukraine win, force Ukraine to win somehow, even though that's not going to happen. But the interesting subheading there was Europe must rearm at once to prevail over dictators who threaten humanity. Obviously, they're talking about China and Russia. So it's not that China and Russia are threatening Western and particularly US hegemony. They're actually threatening all of humanity now, which is pretty much everybody. Last time I checked the definition of humanity, that's pretty much all the people on the planet, including people in China and Russia. Which is a significant percentage together. It's a significant percentage of the actual global population, which is, So I don't know how people call themselves journalists and get away with writing that kind of shit, because not only is it propaganda and bullshit propaganda at that, but it just doesn't make any sense either. This Telegraph journalist is deciding that China and Russia are threatening or a dire threat to the existence of people in China and Russia, as well as the rest of the world. Yeah, things have got pretty bad. But anyway, the Brits have been told that this week that they're going to war. What was it? 6 years They don't even have it anymore. In less than 6 years, they would be at war. And that let me look it up here. What was it? Conscription. Yeah, so this is a former British.
The head of the British military, Sanders. He's not poor. He's current, isn't he?
Yeah. Whole UK must prepare for conscription within 6 years, unless Putin is defeated. So then, following up, ABC, Britain says it has no plans for conscription, which is nice, after top general says the UK may need a citizen army. And then Downing Street also rules out conscription after a military chief's call for citizen army. So this was apparently just some, this military chief guy just talking off the cuff, but didn't maybe say that this wasn't official policy.
I don't think it's off the cuff.
Army chief says people of UK are pre-war generation who must be ready to fight Russia. The Ministry of Defence clarifies it has no plans for conscription after General Sir Patrick Sanders says the UK should take steps to place society on a war footing. Because, again, explain. This goes back to we talked about this last week, when they say Ukraine must win or everything goes to shit. The whole world will collapse if Ukraine doesn't win. Russia, and then the best you can get from it is Russia's going to immediately invade Poland and all the Baltics, and then within a few days it'll have done that, and then it'll be in France. France, historically, meh, not very good, collapse, despite the farmers, and then it'll be on the boat saying, straight off the coast of France, straight over to land on Ellis Island, maybe would be appropriate, and then from there just invade the US, and this is within a few years, yeah. Well, it'll probably take a few weeks for the Russians to do that, which is why the Brits think that we need to get a citizen army going and be ready to fight the Russians, because we're going to war with them in 6 years. That's the narrative, I suppose. I don't know what. Obviously, that's bullshit. So I don't know what the real. Well, I can imagine what the real reason is as to why they're putting that out. It's just to kind of like. They're getting desperate and they've run out of ideas as to how to G up public opinion and political opinion and whatever to keep supporting Ukraine with money and weapons. So they decided that, well, let's just scare people. Let's tell them. I mean, we've intimated this before, often, in terms of Putin's dictator. Putin wants to recreate the Soviet Union, but I don't think that was explicit enough. We've said that over and over again, but I don't think it was explicit enough. We've even intimated that he might invade or he would invade Europe or take another country in Europe, whatever. But I don't think, at least from the British perspective, I don't think that it's clear enough. It's not close enough to home for the average British person. So let's just go straight out and tell them that we're going to be at war with Russia. The UK is going to be at war with Russia within 6 years, and we need to form a citizen army, and all of you are being conscripted. Is that clear enough now? Do you understand the threat from Putin now? We've just told you that you, average, Bob from the UK, Bob the builder, working a 9-to-5 job, you're going to have to give that job up, pick up a weapon, put on a dodgy helmet, like Dad's army, and go straight to war with the Russians within 6 years. Is that clear enough? Now, will you donate some money to Ukraine?
Right.
Have I scared you enough yet?
Yeah.
What you might have done if I believed
so this is the rules
bullshit.
to keep the money and weapons
What else
for Ukraine.
What other reason could there be for talking about war with Russia?
It's dark times, and obviously pathocrats everywhere are pretty destructively going nuts. So another one is, if not the Ukraine front itself, then they're thinking of shaping another one in Europe against which to send British men to die. In a war, I presume they think they can control, like they have Ukraine. It didn't escalate into mad, and it's fairly, kept within certain parameters. Because, why would you do that? Well, another motive isn't it's not the external. My idea is that they keep talking about the rules-based orders and all this international shit, but really it's mostly a focus on internal. It's to stave off incipient revolution. And who's your main threat? It will be young males inside your country. So if you can get them out the door to die on foreign fields, you get to survive revolution.
The problem with getting them out the door to die on foreign fields is there has to be somebody shooting at them.
And you've got Russia.
Russia's not going to be shooting anybody.
Well, if you can provoke the situation so that they do.
Russia's not that stupid. Russia's had a hard enough time, enough on its plate with dealing with Ukraine, which is not over and is going to take several more years. Russia's not in a position.
Then
interest.
send them to that front.
But then nobody's going to go there. I mean, you can try, but no average Brit is going to take up and head off to Ukraine and start shooting Russians. Like, put this back up because I meant to go through the first few paragraphs of this one. Why it may be too late. The first few paragraphs actually just explain. I just find this all so funny. Like, the people are just, their heads are so far up their asses. For the first time in generations, Britain has been gripped by the fear of a third world war. Right. I wonder, where did that fear of a third world war come from? Britain was just gripped by it. Did they make it up themselves? The average Brits just went, holy shit, I think there's going to be a third world war. Or did someone tell them? Okay, apparently the media has been telling them, and the government. It began when the Norwegian Commander-in-Chief, Erik Kristoffersen, no relation to Chris Christopherson, predicted that the West had 2, maybe 3 years to prepare for war with Russia. He was echoing similar warnings from other NATO chiefs. Then Donald Trump triumphed again in New Hampshire. This is what, it's all going downhill. Like, it's just, these are all very bad omens. Very bad omens. Donald Trump again triumphing in the New Hampshire primary, thereby rendering a Biden-Trump rematch next November a racing certainty, which raises the spectre of chaos in Washington, with dire consequences for Ukraine, for Europe, and the cause of democracy, because if America's out of the picture, because it's too, embroiled in a hissy, catfight between Trump and Biden, and then Trump and the CIA, or whatever. Just they've got too many things that are going on there to think about. And if they're friends back in Europe, Europe is just left bereft, isolated, alone, quivering in the face of the Russian bear, like something out of a romance novel. Anyway, Europe and the cause of democracy. And the week ended, as if just the cherry on the cake, just to bring it all home. The week ended with the ominous appearance of Vladimir Putin. He appeared. I'm reliably told that he did literally just appear there, like in a kind of cloud of smoke. There were just cameras on just on an empty area in Kaliningrad, and he kind of, what's the term, manifested or he just materialized out of thin air in Kaliningrad, because that's what he does. And this is Russia's fortified enclave between Poland and Lithuania. Putin's presence there is a stark reminder that if NATO leaves Ukraine in the lurch, Russia is ready to move against the Baltic states too. So his presence there it's not the fact that Russia has had Kaliningrad for
80
years and has had all of its military installations there for a very long time. It's the fact that Putin just happened to go there that is evidence that Russia is ready to move against the Baltic states.
Yeah.
So it's dangerous. I mean,
the Suwalki gap, they've got it all in media articles. I don't think we quite understand the extent to which the Anglosphere media went full.
According to the Telegraph here, like you'd have to assume that by the same token, if you, for example, went to your neighbour's house, if you appeared in your neighbour's house, that would be evidence that you're ready to move against your neighbour, right? Or actually, no, it's not even that. If you appear in your own garden, close to the fence with your neighbour, that's evidence that you're about to move on your neighbour's house and take it over. It's bizarre. It's just I can't take these people seriously. Like, I mean, they're trying to put a story together, and Putin just happens to go to Kaliningrad, which he has done several times in the past. It's a part of Russia, has been for 80 years.
To speak at a youth forum.
Right, he goes to speak at a youth forum in Kaliningrad, and that is evidence for these people, just like as into fulfill their own
That's-
prophecy that this means,
Putin is telling us, I'm about to invade the Baltics.
yeah, I'm not actually here to speak at a youth forum. The fact that I'm here, and only the fact that I'm here, means that, I suppose, from Kaliningrad, because it's in between Lithuania and Poland, only because he's there, does it mean that the Russian forces will be moving from Kaliningrad into Poland and Lithuania, because he visited there. So
The specific scenario they floated in British press was that Russian troops are poised sometime within the next 5-6 years to invade from Belarus into Kaliningrad
yeah,
through the Suwalki Gap,
yes.
so-called.
So anytime Putin appears on any of Russia's borders with other countries, he's
Signaling that he's
signaling
about to
he's
invade,
going to invade that country that he stood beside.
apparently.
Okay.
This wasn't just the British having a normal one. Down in Australia, they've got the media telling people to prepare for mass conscription as well.
Where?
Australia. News.com.au. Australia must consider bringing back conscription as all-out war with Russia looms. I'm telling you, it's the entire atmosphere. The word has gone out. And that NATO guy they mentioned, it began last week. It's interesting that it came from NATO first.
So Australia's going to send troops halfway around the world. Literally, I mean, depending on where they come from, Australia,
They've done it before.
literally the other side of the planet, the antipode.
Oh.
Because Australia, like the east coast of Australia is more or less the antipode of like Eastern Europe.
You've got to see, the playbook they work from is like this. Australia, for example, they lost most of their troops in World War I fighting in one specific spot, Gallipoli, which is basically the Straits of Bosphorus. What were they doing there?
Johnny Turk.
Churchill had them go there to fight the Turks, ostensibly, the old Ottoman regime. Why? To draw down Russian interests and to keep Russia in the First World War. It was a sick game where the idea was that the British imperial elite would try to make it look to Russia like we're trying to take Istanbul. Whereas it had been understood when they formed an alliance against Imperial Germany beforehand, the Triple Entente, that Russia will come in the war, and one of the things they could get out of it would be either access to or control over what they've always coveted, Constantinople, the head of orthodoxy, you see?
Mm-hmm.
So Aussies have been brought in to die in their thousands before for a war that was real, but was a ruse, a geopolitical bullshit ruse, like 100 years ago. It forms the basis, in fact, of Aussies' national identity, the Anzac, the great heroic war dead. So when they talk about another world war looming, this is bread and butter for them. This is normal for them. They're having a normal one.
It's come around.
It's just come around again.
on the cycle, yeah. And it's new to people.
They never normalized. They never the UN and diversity and international democracy of nations. That they never they gave lip service to that. And mutually assured destruction and so on, whatever. Yeah, from nuclear weapons. It's just carry on with the great game.
Yeah.
And that's why I wouldn't, seriously, I would not put it past them to, because what was going on at that time, there was a lot of lefty, the Russian Revolution had happened. There was a shitload of labor unrest, unions during and after the war, First World War.
I think they're just trying to spread insecurity and fear among the population. No, there's somebody trying to putting these messages out. Or they're all putting the messages out, obviously, but in concert with each other. And it's designed just to generate a sense of insecurity among the general population.
And hopefully it means they won't vote Trump in Americans' case.
Or
What, it's supposed to have tangible political outcomes, or?
I don't know. I don't know what their I mean, I don't know obviously what their goal is, but the result of their goal is, you imagine them doing all this, talking about war with Russia and conscription and talking as if it's the first,
if they mean it.
as if it's the First or Second World War brewing again. and then nothing comes of it. Well, why do you do that? Well, just because, you know. But again, maybe it's actually maybe really instructive, because what we might be seeing and seeing how this is playing out, we might actually be seeing how things are getting an idea of how things played out in the lead up of the Second World War. That is lost to history now, at least in terms of the view of the person on the street, at least who had a bit of sense and could see that there was all sorts of kind of manipulations and you know, rabble rousing and basically creating the conditions for a war that wasn't necessary, you know. Because it's like, as much as regardless of how many history books or documentaries you watch on the Second World War or whatever, they're no substitute for actually being in the position that we are right now, which is on the ground and seeing what's happening and seeing on a day-to-day basis the kind of the different types of messaging and the different manipulations and lies and distortions and twisting and accusations and stuff that are coming out, that all contribute to the overall kind of fervour, you know, that can, in theory, spill over into or end up in.
It's not spill over. It's orchestrated.
Calculated. Yeah.
Now things can get out of hand.
Yeah.
Once you start the fires,
Yeah.
but that's why I didn't come up with that myself. It's written by Lobachevsky in Political Ponology from his observations when he lived through this stuff during World War II. He says a pathocracy reaches a certain point where it becomes a moral imperative from their morality, which is totally not human, but whatever. It has a logic to it, a pseudo-morality. It reaches a point where it becomes basically kind of like what Netanyahu said, is do or die. A biological imperative to stave off revolution / our imminent demise. They want it to go on forever. They always do. And so what better way than to have your likely main opponent, the younger men in the country you're ruling over, than to send them off to die against, quote, an obstinate and well-armed foe, who will then be revered in paeans for generations to come, which keeps people attracted to the national mythos. Look at the Brits every year at the cenotaph. I mean, that's completely a distortion. After World War I, most ordinary Britons remembered World War I as, Jesus Christ, never again am I going to let London go to a pointless war and keep it going and just slaughter entire generations of people. It was against their own government. But that's been turned over the passing generations now into the poppy is now a symbol of British boastful jingoistic pride.
That encourages,
as much as it is to remembering the war dead who were duped by the government.
To keep it alive, like you said, and support and keep people buoyed up in the event that we ever need you to do this again. And that is a good thing. Basically, it was a sacrifice for Queen and country, and they're all heroes and stuff, you know.
I think you're right though that this is an unrealistic scenario because of all. It's a different world now. The Houthis, they have to try and do diplomacy to try and get the Houthis to stop. They can't physically stop them, it seems. Yeah. So it's not realistically going to come to that. But
and MAD still applies. Mutually assured destruction still applies. I mean, regardless, they can send, take troops from Australia, take troops from New Zealand, take troops from the Five Eyes, whatever, and anyone else who will volunteer and muster an army in Eastern Europe, in the Baltics or something, on Russia's border, and they can, they'll have to kind of invade, they'll have to start something going. But Russia has made it clear, and like this is obviously the case with any other nuclear-armed country, that if it got to the point where Russia thought that its existence was imperiled, it would have no compunction about turning London, Paris, Berlin, Madrid, Rome, and Sydney into glass parking lots. And they all know that. So they, obviously, their talk of going to war with Russia carries that implication of it ultimately being a nuclear exchange. And I don't think any of them have any intention of going there, because it's like the farmer killing all his cattle, They just ruin the whole game for themselves and everybody else. So I think that...
Well, American nukes are back in British soil
Yeah.
for the first time in 15 years.
But you have to put all that in position in order to, you know...
Back up your fighting talk.
Yeah. You have to have someone behind it. Anyway, on a more local level, we're getting on here. On a more local level, this sums up what's been going on in France for the past week. People probably know French farmers unhappy with basically, you know, you can argue about the details, whatever, but French farmers are unhappy about the same things that German farmers are unhappy about, and Dutch farmers in particular, and other farmers who are in European countries who have joined in. They're basically, what it resolves down to is Western governments' Green New Deal or greening of the economy and all of the measures they put in place that are negatively affecting farmers and their incomes as a result. So this is part of what farmers have been doing in France recently and are still doing. C'est McDonald's.
Suffoquant sous le soleil et sous la joie, et j'entends dans la musique les cris, les rires qui éclatent et rebondissent autour de moi.
La manure.
Et perdu parmi ces gens qui me bousculent, étourdi, désemparé, je reste là.
Blocking roads, highways.
Je me retourne, il se recule, et la foule vient me jeter entre ses bras. Emporté par la foule qui nous traîne, nous entraîne, écrasés l'un contre l'autre, nous ne formons qu'un seul corps. Et le flot sans effort nous pousse enchaîner l'un et l'autre, et nous laisse...
Apparently Paris is going to be blockaded starting from tomorrow, Monday. And they've also been on the border, close to the border between France and Spain and Portugal. French farmers have been stopping imports of products, particular products that are being brought in for and sold at a cheaper price, being brought in, ordered, let's say, by big department stores and stuff, grocery stores, grocery chains, and stopping those trucks, emptying the products out of it, and in some cases overturning and burning the trucks. So they're not happy. Basically, farmers are being squeezed and pushed by governments. And it all does result, because like I saw some bullshit community note on some post on Twitter where the person said that it was because of governments kind of net zero or greening of the economy policies that was why the French farmers were protesting, and the community note said it's not actually this, it's about the price of fuel and blah blah subsidies or whatever, you know what I mean? It's not about, but it's like, that's stupid. I mean, so many people in community notes have no fucking idea what they're talking about. But anyway,
technically it's correct though.
It's technically correct, but it's not, because those policies are directly related to, they come from the government's net zero, anti-climate change policies. It does all resolve back to climate change, government policies around climate change.
Yeah.
Zero carbon, I should say.
They work hard and they get
a shitty end of the deal.
The shitty end. They get like, I don't know, hundreds of euros a month or something. Not even 1,000. Yeah, and they're poor and they're faced with suicide or ruin, and that's indirectly. Then that is, you can say, all linked back to that being some kind of crazy destructive goal. That is more explicitly stated in the case of the Netherlands and Germany, and in Ireland as well. There's no backlash against it in Ireland yet, but they are explicitly saying we're trying to cull herds and reduce the numbers of farmers by 1/3. They don't dare do that in France. France has the largest agricultural industry in Europe, and so it's a lot more touchy, So it's been happening maybe more slyly, where there's just constant downward pressure.
Yeah.
As far as the farmers are concerned, on what they get paid for their produce, and that's why they're bitchy about imports, because imports are often cheaper and they undercut their own prices, and the big chain stores will always go for those, of course, seeking profit and ever higher return. And they're sick of the corruption. The retail store owners who are in bed with government in typical corporate fashion, their profits go up and up and up, and their wages go down and down and down. And so they're done. We've been here before, but this is worse, though. In 2018, I remember, summer of 2018, there was a serious farmers' protest. Not summer, January 2018. Later that year, the yellow vests kicked off. But the user, the sort of customer end of things, where like people were feeling the pinch more generally. But it began, I remember, with a big farmers' protest, locking down some highways, doing some of that stuff, spraying manure on a few prefectures. This time it's like 10 times worse in numbers. They've burned down a building in Narbonne, which is a government building. Kind of. It's like a welfare agency for an insurance company for farmers workers. They sprayed a lot more buildings with manure. They've been a lot more aggressive in the numbers. And so this thing is about a blockade of Paris. I don't know how literally a blockade is. It just highways and some main roads? I've often thought, what would happen if people were ever going to get serious about doing something to basically reverse the rot, which typically happens from the centre out, right, in the capitals of Western countries. What would happen if the food-growing peripheries got smart and basically laid siege to the capitals? That's kind of where we're at.
It could come. It could get there pretty easy. Breaking news. We'll have to watch and see where that goes.
But before you leave that topic, though, I got to mention the fact that this is all happening while Macron is in India.
Yeah.
He's coming back tomorrow. He's got his new youngest ever gay, half Jewish prime minister handling it.
34, yeah.
You'll be all right. I'm off to India.
He takes it really seriously, yeah. This one, breaking news. First time ever. 3 US troops killed and 25 injured in drone attack in Jordan. Against a base in Jordan.
Probably connected with the facility that produces the ISIS terrorists they send over into Syria.
The incident is the most significant attack against US forces in the Middle East since Iran-backed militias began unleashing waves of strikes against US-led coalition bases. So it's basically, Joe Biden said it was carried out by Iran-backed militants. So, and the fact that the Telegraph says the incident is the most significant attack against US forces in the Middle East since Iran-backed militias. 3 killed, 25 injured. That's only because they've decided to admit this one. Like we talked last week about all those concussions, traumatic brain injuries in Iraqi bases and stuff. Obviously for some reason they've decided to let the cat out on this one and say that 3 were actually killed and 25 injured. But this is not the first time it's happened. But again, it's all stage managed. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but this must have been bigger or something,
or it might have been more
harder to cover.
Yeah. Well, again, like we've been talking about, you can never tell in the kind of generalized war situation that we're in, where there's conflicts kind of in various different places. You can never tell, particularly when it's the West, particularly America, when they're being attacked, their openness and transparency on what actually happened leaves a lot to be desired, to say the least. So,
yeah, that's
first, so does that mean there'll be strikes against Iran, or just Iran-backed militias? No, Iran-backed militias. There'll be maybe strikes against Iran-backed militias in Iraq or Syria as a response, probably in the next few days.
Or the White House will plead with someone to plead with someone to plead with
maybe,
someone.
Yeah.
No,
well,
really.
They're not shy about shooting off the odd cruise missile into certain areas in Iraq or Syria. But this one, just as a note, just to remind you about, maybe you forgot about COVID, but BBC misrepresented COVID risk to boost lockdown support, and the inquiries have been told. Epidemiologist Professor Mark Woolhouse criticised the corporation for reporting rare deaths among healthy adults as the norm during the pandemic. BBC was allowed by who? BBC was allowed to misrepresent the risk posed by COVID to most people to boost public support for lockdown, the UK COVID inquiry has heard. eminent epidemiologist and government advisor, Woolhouse, lambasted the corporation for having repeatedly reported rare deaths or illnesses among healthy adults as if they were the norm. He said this created the misleading impression among viewers at the start of the pandemic that we were all at risk and the virus does not discriminate. Do you remember that? The virus doesn't discriminate. You're all at risk.
This is very...
Remember how you were fooled and lied to and manipulated and terrorized?
This is very carefully written, because in one move here they're pushing the BBC under the bus while giving it an out because it was, quote, allowed to do so by what, the gods of government,
yes.
Whitehall. Super. This is just more past in the book. I don't think that the British COVID inquiry.
Yeah. The stuff that actually comes out is the tip of the iceberg, obviously. That's the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. So
we didn't get to Texas border.
Texas border, just give us a quick wrap up. We don't have to go into it in too much detail. What's happening?
Well, I'm not sure, because we
know the details of what's going on, right?
The details are that there's a fight over Eagle Pass, one particular spot, Shelby Park, next to Eagle Pass. Yeah, they were just migrants are coming over the river and they're being processed there. It's not just where they're getting in. It's basically a kind of a hi, welcome to the United States. Yeah. Papers, please. Oh, you don't have any? Fine, we'll give them to you. Off you go. It's a processing place, you know. There's NGOs there. There's government workers there. They're all in on it, so to speak. So ostensibly, Texas state said enough of this shit, and they brought down Texas National Guard to
put razor wire up to stop them.
And physically stop them. Which
then
calls a showdown. The Supreme Court ruled you can't do that. That's federal jurisdiction.
So
and Texas says...
Federal troops came down and started removing the razor wire.
Did they?
Yeah.
So
there's no standoff as yet, but I mean, apparently more other states are sending their National Guard and other, private or whatever.
Half of U.S. states have issued support, and some will send actual troops to help.
And in response, the Biden government stops approving contracts for LNG for Texas gas companies to extract and export LNG.
Well, the Biden White House says, we're withholding temporarily further export licenses for LNG, which affects Texas most because it's basically
LNG
where it all comes out of in the United States, or much of it. But the Biden White House didn't connect the issues. They said it's for climate.
Of course.
To save the planet.
Hello? Who believes that?
But yeah, you reckon that in Texas they are understanding this as a shot across the bow?
Of course, yeah.
Fun and simple. Okay. I've got a few questions about it though. Someone has videoed, we don't have time to play it, maybe next week. There's video of people who live near there, and they just here's the spot where the issue is. Okay, follow me. And they get in their car and they drive half a mile down the road, and the gate's wide open, and there's people coming through, either side of it. And he's they're still coming in. The media's got the whole focus point on this one spot, but either side of it, they're pouring over. So I'm not sure. I'm thinking trap, possibly. This is right as this Civil War movie is being promoted in the US. The new Alex Garland movie. It's all a bit contrived, no? Civil War would be how they'd like to see it. Because the last thing, remember what we discussed with the British conscription thing, the last thing they want is revolution. If you see it's coming anyway, you try and shape it too. It's better if it goes 50-50.
You want chaos. You want people fighting either with each other or within one country, or fighting against some other, cut out kind of enemy. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, yeah. It's all.
But that's just a caveat. But I got to admit, it looks like. I mean, there's a trucker convoy heading for the border as a show of support to Texans, or it'll be like a vigilante group that physically helps out with policing the thing. I'm not sure what it's going to play out, but apparently they get there tomorrow, so we'll see how big that convoy is. It's coming from many other states, not just Texas. This could be the American Freedom Convoy and more. It's too early to call it. I can never trust anything that comes out of the US. It takes a while, to sift things down. And
it could go away, or it could be used as something to stir things up. But we don't know. We'll have to just wait and see. You're only going to be able to look at it all in hindsight and get an idea of what was actually going on. It's hard to predict it forward. It's easy to predict it backwards.
There's a lot of smoke here.
Yeah. Anyway, did you hear that a man died after falling into a giant coffee vat?
That's terrible. Where did that happen?
It wasn't so bad. His grieving widow said that he didn't suffer because it was instant. Anyway. So on that hilarious note,
do you write your own jokes?
I do, yeah. We'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for listening, watching, commenting. We hope you enjoy the show. We'll be back next week with another one. As usual. What?
They're all telling you to hit the like button.
Hit the like button. Hit the like button. Subscribe. Hit all the buttons, not just the like button. Whatever buttons you can find, hit them all. Because, why not at this point? So until then, have a good week and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Bye, all.
Can't stop the signal now.